But I guess we could probably start with Rolando, can't we?
Yeah, we can start with Rolando. So, Rob, I need to ask you about a classic iOS game called Rolando because this is a game that came out in 2008 and it's culturally significant because in 2008 we were just starting to see what iOS could be as a gaming platform. And what Rolando did, instead of just like porting some junky apps from some other platform onto iOS with complicated on screen controls, it used the sensors and the technology in the iPhone to build a game that was very specific to that device. And for Rolando, that meant using the accelerometer to tilt your phone to move these little round characters and roll them across the screen in kind of it's basically a puzzle platformer game. And that game, though, it disappeared in 2017 when Apple migrated to the 64-bit architecture. And it was probably one of the most beloved games that disappeared in that transition because a lot of the classic iOS games that were really popular from back in the day did, in fact, get migrated to 64-bit. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And we lost a lot of games then, a lot of apps, including Rolando. And today, as we record this, Rolando has come out with a new edition called Rolando Royal Edition, which is basically a remaster. They moved the original game to the Unity game engine, added a lot more detail in the background, textures, particle effects, overlapping background elements, all that stuff that is very common in a modern iOS game, but was completely absent from the 2008 game because that was an entirely different era 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get this out first. And I think we maybe mentioned this on the last episode, and I said it to you today. I have no recollection of this game existing. I feel like I'm living in a parallel universe. Everyone's going, "Oh, Rolando's back." And I'm like, I don't know this game. I don't remember it. I'm pretty sure I've never played it. As far as I can tell, the first time I've even seen screenshots of it was from your article today with the side-by-side. So I've got there was no excitement from me that, it's back, because I honestly just cannot remember it at all.
I was pretty proud of my title.
What was your title? I can't remember.
Rolando rolls back onto the App Store.
Nice. Nicely done. There you go.
All right, just here's a behind the scenes story for you. I just got back from a trip to Ireland, and I've been a little jet lagged. And I usually start the day out feeling pretty good and ready to go and get a lot of work done. And then pretty early in the evening, I just run out of gas because it's effectively, midnight in Dublin. So I've been going to bed really early, and last night a bunch of stuff came up and just interrupted my day, and I didn't get to writing this review. So this was a review that I played the game. I'd been playing the game for a few days because I only just got the codes for, got access to it a few days ago. I've been playing the game and I was researching the game, but I didn't start writing about the game until this morning at, I think, 3:30 in the morning, maybe 4 o'clock. And thank goodness it's a really good game, and it was really easy to write the review and it only took a couple of hours because I don't know. Otherwise, it just wasn't going to happen because I crashed last night and just couldn't get it done yesterday. So I did it this morning, super early.
Well, I've got a review for you because you texted me and you said, play Rolando, buy it. I don't like it. I don't like tilt controls. I don't like motion controls.
Oh.
Just to be clear, there's clearly, I played the first few levels, and clearly there's nothing wrong with the game. Like, I can see that it's a very good game, but motion controls just don't work for me. I'm not interested. So
yeah,
it's
a very,
they at least they got my £3.
All right, well,
it's fine. They can keep that.
It's a very specific mobile type of experience that I understand is not for everybody, and there's a very strong dose of nostalgia involved with this particular game, in that it's a game that I think for a lot of iPhone owners was probably one of the first games that they played, right? I mean, there are other things like Tap Tap Revenge and other games that came before this, because this didn't come out till the end of 2008, but it's still one of the very earliest games. And what set it apart really was the way that it used the existing technology in the phone as a game mechanic. And I think what they've done with the remaster is by making it more 3D, by adding these textures, they've been true to kind of the roots of the game, which is the tilt controls and the gestures and all that. But they've layered in this incredible environment, which, coupled with the soundtrack by DJ Mr. Scruff and the sound effects.
Sorry, you're making up names, are they?
No.
What did you just say?
No, DJ Mr. Scruff. There's no period after Mr. I checked. And
I see.
And it just works really well, I think, from a mobile standpoint. But I totally get that this game is probably not for everybody, but it's also, in some respects, it's very much of its time. But the remaster, if you liked it at the time, works really well on today's phones, and it's just a little more immersive and colorful, and sounds even better with the improvements in speakers and things like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it looked, like I say, this isn't a judgment on the game. It's just not for me. But it looks really nice, as you say. The soundtrack is really good. I mean, if they remaster Flight Control, let me know, because I'll be throwing money at my phone.
Well, I've been hearing things, Rob, and that's one that gets thrown around a lot. I don't know if have you heard about Game Club?
Yes, yeah. This is the people that are trying to sort of bring back old iOS games.
Yes, and their business development guy is Eli Hodap. I'm sorry, Eli, for totally butchering your last name, but he was the former editor-in-chief at Touch Arcade, and he's working for them now, and they've got a team of developers who are working with the original creators of some of these classic iOS games to bring them forward and make them work on modern iPhones. A lot of these were either their art assets were constrained to very specific dimensions for the early phones, or they were built on all kinds of, weird Flash-like platforms that aren't really used,
Sure.
Like Adobe type stuff that's not really used any longer. And so they're moving them to modern game engines and bringing them back. They released Hook Champ, which was a really popular game back in the day, and they're doing like one a week, which is really crazy to me. But I met Eli when I was at GDC a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco, and we talked about it, and one of the things that he explained to me was that each of these old games has kind of a classic set of problems for bringing it forward to modern iOS architectures, and because they're basically leveraging scale, where they're able to figure out, all right, well, if the game was built this way back in 2008, then here's what we need to do to make it work in 2019. And if it was done this other way with this other set of tools and engine or whatever it happens to be, here's what we have to do to make that work. And so they're kind of working their way through a catalog of older games and bringing them forward, and they've got the efficiencies of having solved these problems for one game. They can kind of apply it to a bunch of different games, and hopefully that way, with still a relatively small team of people, they're able to bring these new games out on a weekly basis.
Yeah, that's very cool. Like I say, that clearly I somehow just had complete blindness to Rolando, but there are a lot. Like I say, Flight Control, I think, is the one that jumps to mind. I think that was the one because I didn't get an iPhone until 2009, I think, so the App Store was a bit more fleshed out at that point. But yeah, Flight Control, I think, was the first game that I really spent a lot of time on. And yeah, I just want that back.
All right, Rob, enough about games. I want to talk to you about the iPad, because you, I think, went on another spending spree and got yourself a new iPad.
I did.
Which
I did. I decided this is it. I'm going to get one. I'm gonna.
you are gonna you dove right into the multi-pad lifestyle is what I think you probably did.
No,
all right.
I just got one.
The solo
but I thought,
pad.
there might be something to this iPad thing, so I'll give it a go.
Yeah, 9 years later, he buys an iPad. All right, explain to me, what did you get, and what are you doing with it?
So I got the new iPad Air. I was gonna get the Mini, and I think regular listeners to the show will be like, "Hang on a minute, Rob, didn't you always say you wanted a Mini?" I did. And then when I was on the page, I thought, yeah, but for a little bit more, I could have the Air, and that's a big one. So I got the new Air, I got a pencil, and I picked up like this little folio case from Amazon. I wanted something with a pen slot for the pencil,
Sure,
so that I could at least keep it all together. And I found something on Amazon. Case has turned up. It's pretty good. So yeah, that was what I bought.
that right there is a ringing endorsement. It's pretty good.
Yeah, well, it was like £8 on Amazon. I mean,
okay, I thought you meant the whole iPad.
Oh no, just the
Okay.
case. The case is pretty good.
All right.
And the iPad's what I expected. I mean, it's not like I haven't touched an iPad for 9 years.
No, I know.
I did have one years ago. I had the original Mini.
Yep.
And we have stacks of iPads and all manner of other tablets at work. So, I do interact with them at least a little bit.
Right.
So, and I guess your question is, why have I bought one? Because I don't really like iOS. I don't really like doing stuff on my phone. I always use my Mac. I felt like I kind of wanted something where, just for sort of browsing the internet and reading and stuff like that, where I don't really want to get my whole laptop out, but the phone is, even a big phone is too small for like sort of decent browsing. Right. And, I wanted to try my hand at drawing, I guess. And the iPad's a pretty good place to do that because there's a lot of decent apps around.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think those are all good reasons to try an iPad out. And I'm actually myself in the process of acquiring a second iPad. Now, you may recall I do have a second iPad currently because when I crushed my iPad Pro last summer, I got a 9.7-inch iPad, and it's good. I actually used it a fair amount when I was in Ireland because it works better than a laptop on a tray table in an airplane. And so, I just prop the sucker up on the tray, and I have this little Logitech keyboard called Keys to Go, which is a really bad keyboard that has incredibly long battery life and is super tiny and light. So it has that going for it, but it's not a great keyboard. But I was using that to do a little writing on the airplane, that kind of thing. And I thought, you know what? All these iPads are going to the A12 processor, and that to me says that there's going to be a big announcement at WWDC about what's going to happen this fall with the iPad. And so I really want to upgrade my iPad to the current processors. And so what I decided to do was dig through my drawers, find all my old gear, and trade it in. So I'm trading in let's see, an iPhone 6, a 6S, a Series 3 Apple Watch, and I sold a couple of Ecobee smart thermostats through Twitter in the last week. And I'm using that money. To get myself one, an iPad Mini, your iPad, and two, a bridge keyboard for it. Because you know what I'm going to do? I'm trying to come up with the smallest, lightest, most compact writing tool that I can absolutely find. Most of the time, I expect that iPad is going to be for reading books, comics, whatever. Just kind of more of a consumption device. But I still want something, especially with a keyboard, where if I'm in that kind of situation where space is limited, I can actually use it to write. I mean, when I was on this trip, I used the 9.7 Sum on a plane to write. But when I was like on a train or in the back of a Uber or whatever it was, I did a fair amount of work on my phone, and it was okay. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. I wrote like an 800-word column for Mac Stories Weekly
Wow.
entirely on my phone from a tour bus, because it was like one of those things where, I mean, I wasn't working that much on vacation, but you're on a tour bus, it's late at night, I was heading back to Dublin on like a 4-hour, I had like a 3-hour bus ride where it was completely dark outside. There's nothing to look at. And so I just sat there with my phone and wrote a story. But I would have liked to have done that on an iPad mini. I didn't really have the space. I didn't have a tray in that situation. I didn't have a lot of space to really maneuver and use something bigger. But with a mini, I figure at worst I can thumb type. And at best, I'll have the ability to use a keyboard if I can get I'm thinking of getting the Bridge keyboard that can attach to a mini.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, that totally makes sense. If you're looking for something compact, as you say, you're capable of doing it on your phone, but just the mini where it's slightly bigger, and you're actually getting, the iPad apps rather than iPhone apps, which for the most part are the same, but you're still getting a little bit of extra screen space and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, and one of the things you mentioned there that I'd actually forgotten, like comics is another reason I got this, because I have a bunch of digital codes from where I've bought physical comics, and you get the codes with those. Right. And I've also bought a bunch of the comic bundles from Humble Bundle. So I've got like this big folder full of digital comics that I've bought that I haven't read because I don't really want to sit on my Mac and just sort of sit at a desk and read them. So like an iPad is another. That's a much better way to be reading digital comics than sitting in front of my computer.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I've found myself reading more electronic books recently. And the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, for all of its benefits, is just not something you want to sit in bed with and try to read from. It's too big and too heavy for that. It's fine if you're sitting at a table or whatever, but it's not good for lounging on the couch or in bed or whatever it is. So I think the mini, it's an iPad that I've never really owned for myself, and I wanted to see what it would be like to use it as kind of my secondary iPad. So we'll see. I mean, I haven't bought one yet. I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for the boxes to turn up so I can turn in all this old gear and get my store credit before I buy the iPad. So it'll probably be a couple of weeks, but either next episode or maybe the one after that, I'll be able to kind of preliminarily report on how it's been going.
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I mean, if you've got a box full of stuff, you might as well trade it in if you need to buy something new.
Yeah, I've got too many electronics around here. I just got to start. It's electronic spring cleaning.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I did have a funny moment. Like, obviously, I don't think we've spoken about this, but I ordered the iPad online and it was going to arrive tomorrow, actually. Because they were sort of back ordered and stuff like that. And then on Saturday, I checked the Apple store near me, or it's not near, but it's close enough. And they had them in stock, so I went and picked one up. And I get home, and oh, brilliant! I can open it up. And I'd had the pencil for a few days anyway. And as I was setting it up, I sort of realised that what I'd done for the last sort of 3 or 4 years is just anytime there was any iPad news or talk or anything like that, I just sort of blanked it out. So I'm sort of sat in front of this device, like, for all the things I know about the Mac and Apple as a company, the iPhone, and just tech in general, I just ignored everything about the iPad, so I had no idea what I was doing. So, like, I ended up going through, I went back through, like, the Mac Stories, the Club Mac Stories archive and read a bunch of the apps, and, I was looking through, like, Federico's iOS review, because I couldn't remember what things were actually part of the iPad and what wasn't. It was kind of a weird feeling that I sort of subconsciously just ignored all this stuff and I just didn't have any knowledge to start with.
Yeah, I was going to tell you that there's totally a website out there that you can go to and learn about all this stuff.
It's called Mac Stories. This is an iPad. It's very confusing.
It's super confusing. It's naming. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it's but yeah, like I say, I mean, it's not difficult. I mean, you can Google, 50 best iPad apps, and you're going to have 10,000 different articles that are going to give you. I mean, the funny thing is, you read one or two of them, and then you're done, because all of these kind of sites like use the same kind of list. So the kind of stuff that's in Club Mac Stories and places where there's a lot more effort put into the content was a lot more useful to me than some of these places that I was finding.
We thank you as a subscriber of Club Mac Stories for your compliments.
There you go.
I extend my official gratitude for the Mac Stories team to Mr. Rob Lewis of Portsmouth, UK. I got to ask you, when I crossed the border into Northern Ireland a couple of days ago, I texted you or I tweeted you and Mike Hurley and said that I was in the UK. Did you think I was in England?
Yeah, so I was out with Jess. We were, I can't remember where we were just out and about, and my watch buzzed, and I said, "Oh, John's in the UK," and I said, "Oh, if he's in London and he hasn't told me," and then I thought about it for a second, and I went, "No, I bet he's just crossed the border and he's just telling." And then obviously I text you, and that's exactly what you said. You're like, "Oh, yeah, I've just crossed over the border."
Right? Yeah. No, we went on a tour into Northern Ireland, and so it's funny because when you cross the border, I was using AT&T has a deal where I think it's like $10 a day. You get to use your data from the U.S. in a bunch of different countries. I think they have like 100+ countries, and it's all of Europe and the UK and whatnot. And when you land, they send you a text message saying, "Hey, just let you know, you're incurring this charge of $10 a day now that you're in the Republic of Ireland." So fine. But then when you cross the border into Northern Ireland, you get the same text message again. I guess they send it every time you cross a border to a new country, or at least, connect to a different carrier for that particular country.
Yeah, I assume that's what's happening, because although the border in some situations the border can sometimes go down the middle of a road with houses either side.
Right.
But yeah, I'm guessing that's what's happening. They go, "Oh, hang on a minute, you've changed countries." And I'm guessing their systems don't actually care that the two countries you're talking about are right next to each other.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, like I say, I sort of realised that that's what you'd actually done, and that you weren't. I think what I said, it's not even the proper UK. It's nowhere near us.
It's not the proper UK.
That's across the water.
Come on, it's a kingdom. Come on. Yeah.
So
that
United might be a bit of a stretch at this point.
Probably. Yes. So that's where I kind of ended up the last 2 weeks. I started the 2 weeks in San Francisco, so my body clock is all screwed up. I was in San Francisco for GDC, met with a bunch of game developers. It was kind of a neat experience. I had never done that before, but there are a couple of things. One is it was a lot of fun. I got to see the whole Google announcement about their streaming gaming service, which sounds really great, but I don't think will ever happen. And it'll be like Google Duo or whatever their latest messaging thing was, because I think that there's just so many potential technological issues with actually making that happen. And then layered on top of that, business issues. It's hard to imagine it actually working where game companies really embracing it, but it's a neat idea. And I hope in some respects as a person who plays games, I hope it works. But I started out the week kind of dealing with that stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But on the other hand, I'm also now, I think, on literally 1 million email lists for PR companies, for game companies, which...
Of course you are.
So it's funny because when I started working in Mac Stories, it was like, oh, this is wonderful. I don't get that much email. But that's like any new job, I suppose, right? I mean, nobody knows who you are or what your email address is at first. And now I think GDC probably shared my email with, 20,000 PR firms and game developers, which, good in some respects, because there will be some good games that come out of that we'll cover on Mac Stories. On the other hand, the signal and noise is pretty bad. I get a lot of junk too.
Yeah, I bet. On the subject of Google's, what's it called? Stadia,
yeah,
something like
that.
Stadia. Here's my prediction. This is going to be like when they started with the Google TV boxes, because they've had like 3 different goes at this until they've hit Android TV.
Right.
I think this is going to be the same thing. I think this current iteration that we're seeing will sort of disappear, and then in a couple of years they're going to come out, with something. It'll be improved and it'll be better, but it'll be basic. And I think it's going to take them a few attempts to get something that either 1 really catches on, or 2 that people actually care about.
Yeah,
that's just my prediction.
I think you might be right. I mean, they've done what I think is a very Google thing, which is they have thrown an extraordinary amount of technology at the problem, which might work, but there's a lot more to it. I mean, to me, the most telling thing about the service is that they had no games to show off. They had this one test of Assassin's Creed Odyssey that they did last fall, right?
Right.
Which is a real AAA game, and they were able to get it to run at I think 60 frames per second at 1080p, which is cool over a relatively strong Wi-Fi connection. But they had nothing else other than they kind of mentioned, oh yeah, there's this Doom thing that's going to come someday. So there was that, and there was also the aspect that they had no idea they didn't explain what the business model was, what they were going to charge people, what it's going to cost. Are you going to buy $60 games and they're going to somehow come to you, or is it going to be like $10 a month? It's just not clear at all. And that, I mean, it was pretty funny because I got there and they were building. I'm used to being in San Francisco for WWDC, and first of all, GDC is way, way bigger than WWDC. I mean, it was overwhelming. There are 30,000 plus people at this show compared to like roughly 5,000 for WWDC. And it takes up all of Moscone, not just west, which is where WWDC used to be, but also north and south. So it's the whole complex. And there are just people everywhere. And outside what used to be Julian's, which was a sports bar that everybody used to kind of, I don't know, it was not a good sports bar, but people would gather there because it was across from Moscone West. It's now something else. It's like a craft brewery thing, very San Francisco. But Google was building this little hut, and I went. There's security people around. It was like, a guy walked around the corner. I take a few pictures, posted them online, and they were retweeted by Wario64. Do you know who Wario? You know that?
I do. Yeah.
That my Twitter kind of blew up based on that because Wario64 reports on a lot of game stuff, and I had some of the first pictures of what was going to be the hands-on area for Stadia. And
right,
and it reminded me so much of the Mac Pro when I was at WWDC in 2013 because at that WWDC the Mac Pro was like behind a glass case, very much like the original iPhone. It's like look but don't touch. And at GDC this year, the controller was behind glass, and it was a look don't touch thing. And the little hut that I had seen being built became like a little museum. You could go. There were like 7 stations or so, and they had like issue 1 of Nintendo Power and an original NES and an original Sega. Right. And so they had all these things. You kind of went from the oldest, which is like an Atari 2600, and then you worked your way through history of gaming, and there was like a PS1 and whatnot. And you got to the last thing, and it was the Google controller behind glass. And you know what? It was a little bit like, yeah, Google, I don't know. I'm not sure you've really shown us yet that your controller should be in this array of these historical objects from video game history. It was just a little much.
Yeah, I mean, their controller is much more likely to end up next to the Ouya. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, or
that Kickstarter little thing. Like, come on,
right? Or maybe the E.T. video game that got buried in the dump in New Mexico. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see, won't we?
But, yeah, I don't mean to be too hard on it. I mean, I think the idea is good, and I like the idea that games could live in the cloud, and you wouldn't have updates and all the other frustrations and friction that goes along with playing video games. But especially when you consider what a lot of the world has in terms of internet connectivity, it's really hard to imagine that that's something that's going to be a big deal for a while.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Google engineers, take it out of California and then test it. Because I'm sure their internet's great, but as you say, that's not the story for the rest of the world necessarily.
Right, exactly.
So, cool. Well, yeah, I guess we're probably done for this week. I get this week. It's weird because we do it every 2 weeks, so it's
but it's
really
it is this week, and you know what? We'll be
Yeah.
back in a couple of weeks.
We will, and I'm sure we'd have plenty of topics to talk about in a couple of weeks. I guess I'll probably have some more iPad stuff because I've only had it a couple of days, so I guess I can catch you up on that.
I'll give you some life hacks and tools and tips.
Thank you very much.
All right.